From a young age, Emma Reed lived in a world of luxury and power, where material wealth was always the top priority. As the only daughter of a real estate billionaire, Emma was raised to be the perfect symbol of success and elegance. She attended prestigious private schools, mingled at royal events, and even had personal dance instructors for high society gatherings. Emma seemed to have everything anyone could ever dream of. But beneath the glamorous exterior, her life was far from perfect. Growing up, Emma was constantly reminded of her family's status, with every move and decision scrutinized under the public eye. At school, her peers envied her lifestyle, but few understood the immense pressure she was under. Every day was a performance. From her impeccable manners to her flawless appearance, everything had to be just right. Even the smallest mistake could lead to judgment from both her parents and the society they moved in. Emma's parents, Theodore and Evelyn, never let her forget that her actions were a reflection of the Reed family. To them, weakness or imperfection wasn't an option. Her father, in particular, would frequently remind her that her worth lay in upholding the family's image, not in her personal happiness or emotional well-being. As she entered her teenage years, Emma started to rebel internally. She longed for a sense of freedom, but the world she lived in offered no escape. Social engagements filled her calendar, and her relationships were often shallow and transactional. The few times she sought real connections, they quickly fell apart, leaving her feeling even more isolated. Even her successes felt hollow. She was often praised for her intelligence and grace, but deep down, she knew those qualities were cultivated not for herself but to please her parents and meet the demands of her privileged lifestyle. It didn't help that her mother constantly interfered in her personal life, attempting to control everything from her fashion choices to the people she associated with. Evelyn's suffocating oversight made Emma feel as though she was trapped in a golden cage, forced to meet impossible standards. Books became Emma's only refuge. Classical literature and art offered her a window into different worlds where she could momentarily forget her responsibilities and explore a version of herself untethered from societal expectations. Her academic achievements were impressive, and being accepted into an Ivy League university seemed like an escape. However, even in this new environment, Emma found it hard to shake the feeling of alienation. No matter where she went or how hard she worked, she couldn't outrun the loneliness that clung to her. On the surface, Emma always maintained the image of the perfect woman, beautiful, intelligent, and powerful. But inside, she constantly struggled with insecurities and a yearning for validation. Her relationships with men were often dramatic but quick to fall apart. She was drawn to those who could provide the excitement and attention she craved, but none offered the stability she truly needed. It was at this moment that Jack Donovan entered her life. Jack was unlike anyone Emma had ever met. He came from a middle-class family that valued hard work and honesty. Jack was a down-to-earth man, deeply committed to his work in environmental conservation, with a sincere and humble heart. This stark contrast is what captivated Emma. In Jack, she saw a man who could provide her with the peace she had never known. They met at a charity event for nature conservation, where Emma was mesmerized by Jack's passion and dedication to protecting the planet. Jack, in turn, was drawn to Emma's beauty and intellect, but more than anything, he saw the fragility hidden beneath her perfect facade, something he wanted to protect. Their love blossomed quickly. Jack proposed to Emma on a quiet beach during one of his work trips to Costa Rica. Without much hesitation, Emma said yes. It seemed like her life had turned a new page, offering her a fresh start and the happiness she had long sought. Yet, deep inside, conflicting emotions still lingered. Emma began questioning whether the life she had chosen with Jack was truly what she wanted, or if it was simply a temporary refuge to mask the turmoil within her. As the wedding day approached, Emma's growing sense of unease became more evident. Old habits and desires for adventure and excitement that she once chased began to resurface. Outwardly, she maintained the perfect image of the ideal woman, but inside, her dissatisfaction grew stronger. These doubts and uncertainties would soon ignite a spark that would set her life, and the lives of those around her, on a tragic course that no one could have anticipated. As Emma prepared for her wedding day, she felt like she was stepping into the life many people dream of. Yet, the peace Jack Donovan brought also began to weigh on her. Deep within, a burning desire for a life full of excitement still lingered. And just at that moment, Leo Mitchell appeared, a storm of temptation. Leo Mitchell was Jack's cousin but was completely opposite to him in every way. Born into a privileged, wealthy family, Leo led a life filled with indulgence, rarely giving thought to rules or responsibilities. His reputation preceded him, a man of charm, danger, and decadence. Where Jack was stable and reliable, Leo was thrilling and unpredictable. He moved through life as if it were his playground, leaving a trail of broken hearts and reckless adventures behind him. His penchant for living on the edge was irresistible to those who were curious, and to Emma, it represented everything her life lacked. In Leo, Emma saw the embodiment of freedom. His ease, his disregard for societal expectations, and his uninhibited lifestyle contrasted sharply with the safe, predictable life she had built with Jack. Emma found herself mesmerized by the way Leo commanded attention, effortlessly capturing the room's focus with his stories of extravagant trips and wild escapades. There was something intoxicating about the thrill he carried with him, a kind of allure that made the mundane seem unbearable in comparison. From their first encounter at the family dinner, where Leo arrived late and full of swagger, Emma felt an undeniable pull. Leo's presence was electric, every glance, every subtle gesture between them spoke of an unspoken tension that began to cloud Emma's thoughts. Jack, ever the attentive partner, seemed oblivious to the chemistry building between his cousin and his fiancée. The conversations between Emma and Leo, at first innocent, started taking on a different tone. Soon, their brief exchanges were charged with a dangerous undercurrent that neither of them could ignore. Leo was a master of reading people, and he saw right through Emma's outward calm, recognizing the restlessness and dissatisfaction she tried to conceal. He subtly began to exploit this, making sure his presence was felt without crossing overt boundaries, at least at first. Their coincidental meetings became more frequent, and what began as polite conversation soon escalated into something more profound, more intimate. Emma tried to rationalize it, telling herself it was just excitement, but deep down, she knew Leo had already begun to unlock something within her that she could no longer deny. Emma found herself replaying their encounters over and over in her mind, longing for the thrill of those brief moments they shared. She began to imagine scenarios where she could break free from her current life, running off into an unknown adventure with Leo. Each new interaction made it harder to suppress these fantasies, and the boundary between what was real and what was imagined blurred more with every passing day. Leo's magnetism had created a crack in her seemingly perfect world, and Emma was helpless to stop it from widening. She knew she was playing with fire, but the danger was something she couldn't resist. She lied to herself, saying it was just a fleeting excitement, that she could control the situation. But deep down, Emma knew she had entered a world from which she could never return. The more time Emma spent with Leo, the more she was drawn into the whirlwind of risk. Accidental touches, stolen glances during family gatherings, all of it left her exhilarated but also guilty. She still loved Jack, or at least she believed she did. But that love wasn't enough to fill the emptiness and yearning for adventure inside her. As Emma struggled to keep her secret, Leo continued to create opportunities for them to get closer. He knew that Emma was torn between responsibility and desire, and he was ready to do whatever it took to pull her deeper into this dangerous game. Eventually, the inevitable happened. One evening, while Jack was away on a business trip, Leo invited Emma to a luxurious bar under the guise of picking out a surprise wedding gift for Jack. Unable to refuse the invitation, Emma went to meet Leo. They met at the bar, bathed in the warm glow of dim lighting. Leo's gaze was filled with temptation, making it impossible for Emma to resist. His sweet words were like a slow-acting poison, lulling Emma into a trance. She knew she had crossed a line, but there was no turning back. That night, in a hotel, their secret affair officially began. After that night, everything between them became more complicated. Emma promised herself it was just a one-time mistake, but the truth was she couldn't walk away from the intense feelings Leo stirred in her. They began meeting in secret, sending coded messages, and creating perfect excuses to hide the truth. Each meeting pushed their relationship further, and Emma sank deeper into the spiral of betrayal. The clandestine affair between Emma and Leo continued in the shadows, like a slow-burning fire igniting every time they met. Yet, Emma tried to maintain her perfect facade around Jack. Deep down, she knew this deception couldn't last forever. Little did anyone suspect, Jack, a man who always trusted his instincts, had started to notice something off. At first, the signs were subtle, small details Jack easily overlooked: Emma's increased work trips, unexplained absences, and distant attitude. She always seemed preoccupied, and the playful spark between them had slowly dimmed. Jack initially convinced himself it was just stress from planning the wedding. But as the weeks passed, the little things began to gnaw at him: the hushed phone calls, her reluctance to share her day, and the way her phone was always turned face down. Emma would often stay out late with excuses about wedding errands or catching up with friends, but Jack noticed her stories lacked consistency. One time she claimed to be with a friend, only for Jack to later discover that friend was out of town. Leo's behavior also started raising red flags. He would show up unannounced, always ready to help with the wedding, but seemed overly involved in decisions that had nothing to do with him. Jack recalled how Leo and Emma exchanged glances when they thought he wasn't looking, subtle yet undeniable. It was as if they had their own private world, hidden right in front of him. One evening, as Emma went to bed early, Jack felt an unexplainable gut feeling. It was a doubt he couldn't shake. Quietly, he grabbed Emma's phone, something he had never done before. Within minutes of scrolling through messages, Jack's heart tightened. A short deleted message from Leo, "Miss you," lingered in the phone's memory. Recent pictures of Emma with Leo didn't say it all, but they left no room to excuse their intimacy. Jack couldn't believe what he had just uncovered. He stood there, stunned by the evidence of betrayal. A storm of questions flooded his mind. How long had they been sneaking around? How had he not seen the signs sooner? Worst of all, how could the man he trusted, his cousin, practically a brother, do this to him? The nights following, Jack couldn't sleep. Every time he looked at Emma, waves of anger and pain surged within him. He started watching her every move, from how she texted, to how she talked to him, and the so-called meetings with Leo supposedly about wedding gifts. Jack debated confronting Emma directly but couldn't do it without solid proof. A plan was slowly forming in his mind. Jack decided to keep tabs on them. He quietly checked Emma's credit card statements, noticing multiple charges at places she never mentioned. Once, she told him she was meeting with a florist, but Jack spotted her at a small bar near Leo's place. His fury grew, but he remained silent, never showing his cards. He knew that confronting them too soon would ruin everything, and he would never get the full truth. As the days passed, Jack became more distant. Emma, noticing the change, tried to keep things steady, unaware that every move she made was being carefully observed. Leo, too, began to sense Jack's eyes weren't as friendly as before. Their secret meetings weren't as easy anymore, with Jack showing up unexpectedly at times. Despite the growing suspicion, Emma and Leo continued their risky game. One night, Jack decided it was time to confront the truth. He followed Emma to Leo's house, and this time, there was no doubt. When Jack saw Emma's car parked right in front of Leo's door, a wave of rage and despair washed over him. He stood outside in the dark, watching everything unfold through the dim light of the window. The sight of Emma in Leo's arms felt like a knife to his heart. But Jack couldn't react yet. He needed the perfect plan to expose their betrayal publicly. Returning home, Jack was ready for the final step. He was no longer the quiet man silently enduring the betrayal. The wedding was fast approaching, and Jack knew this would be the perfect time to reveal everything. It wouldn't just be Emma who would pay the price, but also Leo, the man he once considered a brother. Jack's plan was set, and the upcoming wedding wouldn't just be a celebration of love, but a dramatic stage where all dark secrets would be exposed. The wedding day had finally arrived. Everyone believed it would be the happiest day of Emma and Jack's lives, but only Jack knew the truth was about to be revealed. His calm demeanor masked the careful preparation for a grand performance, a dramatic unveiling of all the secrets hidden for so long. A darkness of betrayal clouded his heart, yet no one could sense it from the groom's composed appearance. Emma, in her pristine white wedding dress, looked like a princess out of a fairy tale. Her hair flowed elegantly in soft waves, and her veil sparkled in the gentle sunlight. The guests gasped in admiration as she entered the room, and for a moment, it seemed as though nothing could go wrong. Yet deep inside, Emma felt a growing unease, one she could barely explain. The closer she got to Jack, the heavier the weight on her chest became. Every smile she offered felt forced, every gesture carefully controlled to hide the turmoil she couldn't shake off. All morning, her mind kept drifting to Leo, replaying their secret meetings over and over again. Would anyone find out? Could their stolen moments be exposed on what was supposed to be her perfect day? Each step toward Jack felt like she was walking deeper into a lie she no longer knew how to control. Despite the warm congratulations of her friends and family, the love and devotion expected of her seemed miles away from where her heart truly lay. Meanwhile, Leo, dressed impeccably in his dark suit, stood among the guests, his smile as confident as ever. However, a subtle tension clung to his every move. His eyes darted between Emma and Jack, aware that the carefully woven threads of his affair with Emma could unravel at any second. He had played his part well, pretending to be nothing more than a supportive friend, but the danger was palpable now. As the ceremony began, he couldn't help but feel the walls closing in, though he tried to mask his nerves with casual glances toward Emma, sharing fleeting looks of reassurance. He thought they could still get away with it. Jack's mind, however, was already made up. For weeks, he had rehearsed this moment, building up the courage to confront the betrayal head-on. He had thought of every detail: the right moment, the right words, the final blow. Every time Leo flashed that fake smile, Jack's anger deepened, and now, standing before everyone, he was ready to explode. Jack stood under the bright lights, his presence commanding the attention of the room. Guests whispered admiring remarks about the perfect couple, unaware that this wedding would soon be anything but perfect. His hands clenched the stack of evidence in his jacket, and the weight of betrayal pulled him to the edge. He knew the moment of truth was near, and he was ready to blow everything wide open. As the officiant prepared for the vows, the atmosphere shifted from celebratory to solemn. Emma's steps were slow and graceful, but to Jack, they felt like the march of someone approaching her judgment. Every second brought him closer to the revelation he had rehearsed in his mind, each word carefully chosen to expose the lies. The moment to exchange vows drew near, and this was the precise moment Jack had planned for. When the officiant invited them to share their vows, Jack looked up, staring directly into Emma's eyes, his gaze as sharp as a blade. He took her hand, but instead of reciting words of love and fidelity, Jack began to speak in a slow, heavy tone, full of resolve. "Emma, I'm not standing here today to pledge my love or loyalty. Instead, I'm standing here to speak the truth, a truth I can no longer keep hidden." After Jack exposed the truth in front of all the guests, the atmosphere in the hall immediately became suffocating. Emma stood there, silent, tears welling up in her eyes, but she couldn't say a word. Her entire life seemed to have shattered in that moment. Shame, guilt, and despair flooded over her. Every gaze was fixed on her, as if she were the only betrayer in the room. Leo, standing nearby, was pale, his hands trembling uncontrollably. The weight of the situation pressed down on him as he tried to gather his thoughts. He had rehearsed how he might defend himself, how he might explain everything if the truth ever came out, but now, faced with Jack's piercing stare, his mind went blank. The walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating him as every eye in the room turned his way. There was no escape, no room for denial or explanation. His thoughts spiraled back to the beginning, to those fleeting moments of passion that he thought would remain hidden forever. But now, every lie he told, every decision he made, crashed down upon him. Leo's breath grew shallow, the sound of his heartbeat loud in his ears. He could feel the judgment from the crowd, but it was Jack's stare that held him captive. "Jack, it's not what you think." Leo's voice quivered, the words barely making their way out. He knew, deep down, that there were no words that could mend what had been broken. "Not what I think." Jack's voice cut through the tension like a knife, each word laced with pain. He took a step closer, his face a mix of betrayal and anger. "You both deceived me, and I trusted you. I believed in our friendship, our bond. But you took that trust and destroyed it. How can this be anything other than exactly what I think?" Emma's silent tears turned into uncontrollable sobs. She tried to speak, to explain herself, but her voice caught in her throat. The memories of stolen moments with Leo, moments that had seemed so thrilling at the time, now filled her with nothing but guilt. She couldn't bear to look at Jack, the man she once loved, the man she had betrayed. All she could manage was a feeble, "I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't mean for it to end like this." Jack's heart was already broken beyond repair. He turned away from her, feeling the weight of not only her betrayal but also the loss of something much deeper, trust. The hall, once filled with celebration and hope for the future, now felt like a tomb, heavy with the weight of all that had been lost. Suddenly, Leo, desperate and filled with regret, made a decision that no one saw coming. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a gun. "We've gone too far, Jack," Leo said, his voice shaky but resolute. "There's nothing left to lose." Emma screamed in panic at the sight of the gun in Leo's hand. She backed away, but in Leo's eyes, she saw chaos and utter desperation. She knew he was losing control, and this could lead to unimaginable consequences. The room immediately descended into chaos. Guests screamed in fear, rushing to escape. Some crouched under tables, trying to stay out of Leo's sight. But in the midst of the turmoil, Jack remained firm, facing Leo without flinching. "Leo, put the gun down," Jack said, his voice cold but steady. "You don't have to do this." But Leo, his eyes filled with confusion, just shook his head. "No, Jack. There's no going back. It's all over, everything." Leo's voice cracked as he realized he had completely lost control. Emma, in a fit of panic, tried to approach Leo. "Leo, please, don't do this. We can work this out." But Leo no longer heard Emma's words. Everything around him blurred, consumed by the overwhelming sense of loss and guilt. In that moment, Leo tightened his grip on the gun, and in a frenzy, he raised it. Before Jack could react, a deafening gunshot rang out, piercing the suffocating air in the hall. Emma collapsed to the ground, blood spreading across her once pure white wedding dress, turning the solemn ceremony into a scene of horror. Jack rushed to Emma's side, tears streaming down his face as he held her cooling body. "Emma, don't leave me." Jack choked out in despair. But he knew it was too late. Emma could no longer respond, and the crushing weight of loss enveloped Jack, like an invisible blade cutting deep into his heart. The room fell into a deathly silence, broken only by Jack's faint sobs next to Emma. Leo, still holding the gun, stood there, shocked and horrified by what he had done. His mind flashed back to their shared moments of betrayal and secret desires, but they all seemed so distant now, swallowed by the enormity of the tragedy. Like a man devoid of life, Leo let the gun fall to the floor, his empty gaze fixed on Emma and Jack, realizing that everything was over. There was no way back. In the deadly silence of the hall, the distant sound of police sirens and ambulances grew louder, approaching what had been a magnificent wedding just minutes before. But now, the scene had completely changed. Guests who had been celebrating the ceremony were now terrified, fleeing in panic, leaving behind a quiet space marked only by bloodstains on the floor, a wedding dress soaked in red, and 3 people caught in a whirlpool of betrayal, despair, and tragedy. Jack knelt beside Emma, tears streaming down his face as he gazed at the woman he had once cherished above all else. Just a short time ago, he had been filled with a consuming rage, the pain of her betrayal burning inside him like a wildfire. But now, with Emma lying there, her life slipping away, that fury had vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sorrow. He had loved her deeply, wanted to build a life with her, to share a future filled with love and joy. But those dreams now lay shattered, like fragile glass broken beyond repair. Every beat of his heart felt heavier as he held her, knowing that nothing could undo the damage. Emma's lips trembled, her breath shallow as she struggled to speak. The weight of her own guilt pressed down on her chest, and in her final moments, all she could manage was a whispered apology. "Jack. I'm sorry." Her voice, barely audible, was full of regret, and it cut through Jack like a knife. She wanted to explain, to say more, but the strength was leaving her body too quickly. The pain in her eyes mirrored Jack's own anguish, and for a brief moment, they were connected once again, but this time not by love, but by the tragedy they were caught in. Jack could only watch helplessly as her life faded before his eyes. He wished more than anything to go back, to take away the hurt, to forgive her before it was too late. But now, there was no time left for forgiveness or understanding. All that remained was the crushing weight of what had been lost, a future that would never come to be. In those final moments, as Emma's last breath left her body, Jack's world crumbled around him. Everything he had known and loved was gone in an instant. The room felt colder, emptier, as if life itself had been sucked out of the air around him. Leo, standing a few feet away, was frozen in place, paralyzed by the reality of what he had done. The gun slipped from his hand, clattering onto the blood-stained floor, but he didn't even notice. His mind was a blur, unable to comprehend the enormity of his actions. He had acted on impulse, a moment of jealousy and rage spiraling out of control. Now, all he could see was the destruction he had caused, the lives he had ruined, including his own. He stared at the lifeless body of Emma, the woman he had once coveted, and Jack, his friend no, his brother who had trusted him. The betrayal hung in the air, thick and suffocating, as Leo stood in the aftermath of his own reckless choices. When the police finally stormed into the room, Leo didn't resist. There was nothing left to fight for. As they cuffed him and led him away, he felt the cold steel on his wrists, but the real weight was the guilt and shame that would follow him for the rest of his days. The man he had been, the charming, carefree Leo who thrived in the spotlight, was gone, replaced by someone he no longer recognized. That fateful day had changed the lives of everyone involved. There was no going back, and no erasing what had happened. The lives of Jack, Emma, and Leo were all consumed by a merciless tragedy, leaving scars that would never heal.